Late Night Thoughts. Late Night Thoughts. An original podcast by Real Deal Media. It certainly is. Tonight, we're going to get into the hidden truths of World War II. Your host, your late night host here, Dean Ryan, is going to be taking you on a journey. A journey into the unknown, although many have called it the well-known. But that's what sets it all apart. As we welcome Matthew Millan to the show tonight, historian, filmmaker. He's seen it all. He certainly has. Let's get started, shall we? Okay. Whew. Let's get started here as we are now live. I believe we are. And we better be for this amount of stress everyone's had lately. But that's okay. That's okay. All right. We are now live here. Welcome, everybody, to Late Night Thoughts. I am your late night host, Dean Ryan, here, coming at you back and forth. As you see, I do the two-step there. Tonight is a original podcast here at Late Night Thoughts as we now go into a in-depth purview of just exactly how we got where we are today. Because of the last 5 years, many people around the world, including myself, have had to question the very history that was taught to us from infancy to modern day. Because we have seen the vast amount of lies from institutions, publications, to even politicians, although that is an oxymoron, but we've had to look back to understand exactly where we're going. And that's why tonight we're going to be getting into the hidden truths of World War II. Things that were never said or mentioned or even talked about, but were just kind of assumed because we had to take people's word for it, and it wasn't even within reach in the grasp to question more for many. That's why tonight we're going to be welcoming Matthew Millan, who's on deck here. He's going to be a wealth of information, a man who's traveled in and out of the Middle East as a filmmaker, as a historian, aficionado, someone who has completely turned World War II upside down and has spoken about the unspeakable. That's right, I'm talking about the Zionists, as we really need to rediscover who these people are and just exactly where they come from and who are the Bolsheviks in relation. Are they the same? We're going to find out, because right now we are sitting on the precipice of World War III. Whether it's wartime theater or not, there is true pain, true suffering, and real-time deaths that are now occurring over there in Gaza. It's no accident, but a well-thought-out plan that's spurring and originated from World War II as it gave us the creation of Israel. We're going to be talking about that as well. And also things I wanted to know. You know, ever asked yourself, when you see any World War II publication or even a cinematic presentation film, why is everything about Germany and the Jews? Because it is called World War for a reason, is it not? So there's things that happen in the world that were outside of Germany, and you know, the little blip mention of Japan, which was a very explosive ending to that war. So we're going to explore those things too, and we're going to relate it to exactly where we are today, where Russia is now preparing for an onslaught attack by NATO, EU, and a coalition of people, including the U.S. and the new long-range Tomahawk missiles that are on its way there. We're going to look into that and just why has Russia been so vilified? Why has a country that if you didn't know it was Russia, you would assume it's our sister country, kind of a Christian nation, you know, similar looking people, bunch of vodka drinkers. I mean, what is the difference? So we'll be talking about that. And where is now China now lying in the mix of it all? How did they become the major power that they are today? Because from our recollection, they were nothing before 1949. Or were they? We're going to find out here tonight. So let's get started as we are broadcasting live on The Real Dean Ryan over there on Facebook. Hello, if you can see me. And also we are broadcasting live on Dean Ryan TV over there on YouTube, as well as the incredible new graveyard warehouse called Rumble. Hello to all of our patrons over there. So good to see you. And I will be fielding questions throughout the night because I'm sure there's many things that all of you out there want to know, and you feel very peeved that you were lied to, at least lied about World War II. So I'm going to be fielding the questions where I can. I'll do my best to do it. But let's now welcome friend of the show, a man who is, you might have seen him on the Real Deal Music Guys with myself and Sean Gregorian, a couple of episodes. He's a historian, a filmmaker, and he is rock and roll royalty almost. Well, at least, well, his cousins in Radiohead, I guess I could say that. One of my favorite bands of all time. But welcome to the stage, the one, the only, Matt Millan. Welcome to Late Night Thoughts.
Hey, great to be back, Dean.
Well, you're looking great tonight. You really dressed for the occasion. You knew that white was the theme.
In my Tuareg get up.
Yes, I love it too. I was going to wear my Shriner's cap, but it's at the cleaners. Matt, I think it's an important time to look back exactly how we got here, because a lot of the headlines, the news, has been suffocated by Israel for better or worse. We've been talking about this country, but a lot of people really don't know the origins and why this was created. So I thought we'd go kind of back in time a little bit and discuss the creations of a lot of these things, but also kind of maybe pick around at some of the other things that were happening in the world that we were told that Mussolini was a bad guy. I know nothing about Mussolini. So now, we want to know just a tad and a bit of how we got where we are today. And so, but before we get started, Matt, what got you into this type of history too? I know we spoke a long time ago and you were very well versed in the theocracy of the Middle East, particularly the creation of Israel. Was World War II always something that was of an interest to you? Did your father talk to you about it? Kind of, how did you get involved in the studies?
One of my best friends who died in 2004, he and I, when we were kids, we just used to eat up every World War II book or World War II movie. We were just obsessed with it. Back then, I had a less cynical view of everything that's happened. But by the time I was in college and I was minoring in history, I started getting a much wider perspective on the events in particular that led us to World War II, and then the Cold War, and then the modern era. So, but it's always been an area of interest, although the interest has changed a lot. Before, when you're a kid, you like the cool tanks and the Messerschmitts,
right?
And the ME-262, the first jet, and all that stuff was really cool when you're a kid. But then, as you get older, and especially being in war, witnessing war, you realize just what that actually entails, the implications of these weapons of mass warfare.
That's a good point. Yeah, World War II, if I could add as well, it was always kind of showcased as the classy war, the noble war. And, that brought about the baby boomers, that's spawned from that. But, it really, I think if there was a film that really kind of helped wrapped my head around just, I guess, the vastness of that war, was The Longest Day with John Wayne and Robert Mitchum.
Oh
And
God,
it really
I
got me.
love that film.
You recall?
Absolutely love that film.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
Robert
that film.
Mitchum, wonderful film. It's a long film. It really plays up to the title, but that was it. And then, so we look back at that war as the just war, and kind of everything that came after that, especially the Vietnam War, that was the beginning, has not been a justified cause for combat the way World War
No.
II was. Why do you think? What is it about World War II on the surface that made it a just war? If you had to be shallow for a moment.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I just went to Saint Mary Église this summer, and I don't know if you remember the scene in The Longest Day where the paratrooper gets caught on the chapel. Do you remember that
Oh
scene?
yes, a wonderful
Yeah.
scene. Yes.
I was actually, they still have a dummy of a paratrooper on the chapel right now. It was really it was a really sobering experience for me. And I think a lot of it is because I went to a lot of the places where the French resistance worked. And, we tend to focus on the courage of on D-Day, the, the invading armies trying to break Fortress Europe. But, this never would have happened without the French resistance, man. These people were operating out of their bicycle shots under threat of, getting rounded up and executed. So, and we tend to really underestimate just the sheer amount of courage that these people had. And
Right.
I've always
There
been
is a
bothered about
plight.
that.
There's a real story to be told about even just the average Russians that were forced to into
Absolutely.
conscription. There really is a
Absolutely,
story to
man.
be told, and that's what I'm upset about, Matt. Is that there really
All the
hasn't been
partisans, though.
a cinematic, truthful film that about World War II outside of Germany. How about the plight of the Filipinos and their occupation by Japan? They were being occupied by Japan. How about that? So
Absolutely. Yeah.
okay, so let's get started here, and let's go back if we could, because World War One, that brings us Franz Ferdinand and Queen, the Anastasia of Russia, and you talk about gulags, you talk about concentration camps. Well, the Bolsheviks were vicious, a partisan, very weird kind of political organization stemming from Eastern Europe, as in Ukraine, that infiltrated the border of Russia at the time, and kind of killed the royal family in Russia. And by
Well,
the way, this is, if everybody would watch Putin's interview with Tucker, that big one from about a year and a half ago, this is exactly what he started that interview with, because it's so key and it's so important, because he's talking about the Zionist and why they're at war with him. But Matt, you want to pick it up from there and maybe just cruise along into
yeah. So
the 30s.
the Bolsheviks were a extreme group that came out of the socialist movement in Russia. Bolshevik means, if I'm not mistaken, I think it means of the majority. It's a Russian word meaning of the majority. And I'd like to point out that most of the Bolsheviks also were killed by Stalin and Lenin. So they themselves, the original Bolsheviks, most of them were also murdered and purged, even though, they clearly led the violent uprising and to overthrow Tsarist Russia. But so Bolshevism kind of, in a lot of ways, was dead by the time Stalin took control, especially when he consolidated his power. I mean, he used, he's typical of so many, and this, Dean, how often it is that some narcissist, pathological psychopath will latch on to a political ideology that's gaining steam just to consolidate power. I mean, we see that with Lenin to a lesser degree, to Stalin, to Mussolini, to Hitler.
Right.
And
right. Well,
so,
we do, and but wasn't there implications that Stalin had been kind of placed into a power by a subdivision of the Bolsheviks, which gave
well,
us the Zionists?
he was a
Maybe I'm
Bolshevik.
confusing that.
Yeah, he was a Bolshevik.
Yes.
But
Okay.
I mean, he was really just a psychopath, though. One of those things that it didn't matter what the ideology was, whatever was expedient to him. I've come across people like this,
Right.
in North Africa, that it just, he happened to, take over one of the nations with the greatest potential, for particularly military potential at the time. So, and
Interesting.
so
Interesting.
Zionism and Bolshevism are unrelated. The only thing you could say about that is there were some Zionist Bolsheviks, but there were also anti-Zionist Bolsheviks as well. Ones who believed that, because coming from especially the socialist movements, a lot of the socialist movements were against Zionism because they believed it was a colonial settler
Okay.
endeavor.
So, Matt, I know this is a basic B type of question, but what is or who are the Zionists? So, how would you describe that? Is it a membership you can buy back then? Was it a religion? Because they weren't, were they already practicing Judaism at that time, or is that something they adopted in the same regard that the Illuminati adopted and infiltrated the Freemasons?
So Theodore Herzl is considered the founder of Zionism, and he was around in the
Yes.
late 19th century. But you could actually predate it to the late 18th century, to Christian accelerationist movements who wanted to accelerate the end times, where those were the first ideas that came in. And keep in mind, at this time, the Ottoman Empire was crumbling. It was a weakening empire. And so also a lot of the colonial powers had their eye on, those areas. They had their eye on, the Palestine, they had their eye on Iraq, or what we consider Iraq now, which then obviously,
Mesopotamia, right?
Yeah. Well, then we didn't, it was just part of the Arabian Peninsula. We didn't demarcate lines until Sykes-Picot in 1918. That was an agreement between the English to carve up the Ottoman Empire.
So did I hear this right? You just said there was a Palestine back then, and I've seen maps where there was a Palestine, because if you were to ask certain people today, they would say that never existed.
Yeah, and that's
for the record,
they give a bullshit. That's a total bullshit argument that they give. For one,
that's a Bolshevik argument. Yeah.
Well, bullshit. So, for one, people live there. So you could call them whatever the hell they want you to call them. People lived there. In fact, there were around 1 million Arabs there in the late. There was a population census in 1900, Ottoman Palestine, 90% Arab. 1922, I believe, population census in British Mandatory Palestine. Actually, it was 94% Arab in 1900, and it was around 94% in 1922 until the European Jewish, the Ashkenazi immigrations came in. So, and also the Ottomans called it Palestine. The British Mandatory, it's called British Mandatory Palestine. So, I mean, people are arguing over a name. A name doesn't give legitimacy to people that are there. The fact that the people are there gives them legitimacy. You know what I mean? The people themselves are legitimate. A name you give them means nothing. So it's a complete canard of it. It's a complete red herring of an argument. It's just to deflect away and dehumanize and delegitimize the people that were already there.
Okay.
So
Okay. So now we kind of have just a quick setting of what World War One and shortly thereafter was. Now, let's kind of now dive into like the 1930s. You have a young rising star, Adolfo Hitler of Germany, who was very popular, so much so he was Times Person of the Year. He had many sycophants in America, Howard Hughes to Henry Ford to
well,
I think
actually, a
Charlie
lot of people.
Chaplin.
No, Charlie Chaplin hated him.
No. I'm sorry. He liked Charlie Chaplin. That's why he adopted the mustache. That's what I meant. Vice versa.
Yeah, no, Charlie Chaplin made fun of him in The Great Dictator, and it was a pretty brutal takedown of Hitler, to be honest. So, I mean, Charlie Chaplin,
So,
he actually fought against a lot of the people in Hollywood who were supportive. And I mean, Charlie Chaplin knew exactly what Hitler was. So,
um, so yeah. So there you have that front on that front right there. So now we're now seeing the rise of things. We see the Grapes of Wrath depicting, as they depicted the Great Depression coming out of the Roaring Twenties. Was there a boom in the American economy after World War One? That is something I never looked into.
yeah, there
Um,
was, but there were also major labor wars. I mean,
okay,
think of the Blair Mountain was 1924 around there, I think, and that was when the miners actually took up arms against the United States government because of they were getting killed in the mines because of the exploitation of the worker. The working
right,
conditions were absolutely dreadful. You had the what was a Yellow Shirtwaist factory fire in 1911 where hundreds of women burned up because they used to lock the doors and not let them out.
interesting.
So
You had the woman's suffrage. You had the
yeah,
woman's suffrage.
you had
Um,
and all these. I mean, keep in mind, like all the 40-hour work week, and all the workers'
and
rights that we have were basically
you,
from the blood of these
exactly.
people who were not only raising arms. In the case Blair Mountain's a rare case of actually raising arms, but going on strike. And so I mean, once again, you look at GDP and the economy, you say, oh, great, it's really rising. But remember, it was still kind of the tail end time of the robber baron, Carnegie's and all
Right.
these. And it was a completely exploitative, abusive time, which actually,
And
that's why that led to the rise of communism. Communism didn't come out of a vacuum, man. Communism came out of the exploitation of the lower class. And I'm not justifying it because it clearly didn't
right.
work. Communism didn't work
Well,
at all, but that's
but just to maybe give you an example of just how prevalent like mining was in logging too, logging. When people hear, if you look at LA, for example, Los Angeles, which was, headed and spearheaded by the 49ers at one point. Well, when you hear Skid Row, people think of the Junkies now, but Skid Row was the name of the city where they were doing a lot of mining and logging, log rolling back in the day. So there's a lot of that history that's still here today. So now we're looking, okay, so we're looking at Germany. What is Germany, if we could describe, what was Germany like in the early 1930s, going into the end of the decade?
so
What was happening over there?
so the stock market crash absolutely destroyed Germany. I mean, Germany was, it had a burgeoning democracy in the Weimar Republic that, was established not even 10 years before, it was established in, what was it, 1919, 1920, around there, but right after World War II or World War One. And so at this time, so through the 20s, Germany was still, because the Versailles Treaty was fairly harsh on them, and they had to pay reparations. They had to, had completely dismantle their army. And a lot of the German officers and the German soldiers felt like they were betrayed because they felt like they still could have won the war, even though any realistic person would tell you as soon as a fresh American America got involved, that they were done for, honestly, at that point, after 3 years of just, at that point, 3 years of just, feeding the machine gun basically with your soldiers. So, yeah, I mean, you're talking, this was the first war where you're talking, you'd have battles where hundreds of thousands of casualties. And so, but Germany felt, there was a real feeling at the time of, kind of a loss of identity, a feeling of betrayal, a feeling of hopelessness. And so that's when this rise of the rebirth of German nationalism came out of it, and why it attracted so many people. So,
okay, so that's a great setup. Now let's, and we're going to go around the world too, but what sparked a anger towards the Jewish Germans that were living there? What was, how did this conflict, or this, I guess you should say, kind of intrepid, outlook on that population, how did this all begin? What were some of the telltale signs?
We have to go back. We have to go back a few
because
decades.
we were, well, and I asked this too, by the way, just so everyone knows, because we were never taught this in America in our standard history classes in high school. It was never mentioned to me. We went to the Museum of Tolerance, didn't know why it happened, never even thought to ask, why were they burning books? But now, because of what we're seeing, everybody's asking. So, Matt, please, if you will, take us back a few decades.
Okay, so yeah, we got to go back a few decades, especially in Eastern Europe and Russia. There were a series of massacres that were occurring in Jewish ghettos. And remember, a lot of Europe still had was Jewish, were ghettoized. I mean, it wasn't until, up through the Middle Ages, they were put in ghettos, and they weren't allowed to have many jobs except in finance and like maybe working for the royal treasurer. They were actually severely limited in what they could do. So it's funny, the Europeans actually created the mythology of the, covetous Jew, to be honest, because they, you know what I mean? By forcing them into these situations where they had very few jobs they could do, that, and also they remember when you had these kings, you go back to the monarchies, the kings did this to the Templars too. The kings would blow their coffers, blow their whole finances on stupid wars or ridiculous building projects, and they would blame other people. And the Jews, and then later the Templars, were an easy people to blame because they were the other. And so, and especially during the plague as well. The plague was, people were massacring
the bubonic
Jews.
Plague. You talking about the bubonic plague?
Yeah, in 1348, people were actually massacring Jews and claiming the Jews were poisoning their wells, even though the Jews were dying in the same numbers as everybody else.
Well, but isn't it also true? Because I think this is very key. You mentioned, ghettos throughout Europe, the Jews were allowed to, work, but weren't they also? And this is where the marriage of show business comes along. And how prevalent it is. Wasn't that a way for them to make money to, these little showbiz gigs?
Absolutely.
You know anything about that?
Because for one, there were not many opportunities except in Western Europe. And then whereas in Britain and France and other places in Western Europe, it was actually a little bit different, where the British had plenty of established wealthy Jewish families. And even in the 1860s, the prime minister Disraeli was Jewish. So it was the game was a lot different in Central and Western Europe than it was apart from Germany. I mean, things started changing in Germany because of after World War I. But Eastern Europe was rife with what they call pogroms, which are massacres. The Eastern European Jews experienced this quite a bit. And so what was happening is a refugee problem developed in places like Britain, And actually, I think it was a majority of British Jews were very prejudiced against the Eastern European Jews. Also, for coming in, they looked at them as poor, uneducated, kind of the same story you see, quite a bit.
Right.
So, and
Interesting.
but
Mhm.
the Eastern European Jews, because they came from really dire circumstances, they tended, like, if you take a snapshot of, say, 1917, right before the Balfour Declaration, you would say that the majority of English Jews were anti-Zionist, actually. They were anti-Zionist, and for an obvious reason that people don't think about. What happens when you say the Jews have a nation and they have a homeland? What about the Jews who live in Britain? The Jews who live in Britain were all, wait a minute, our families lived here for hundreds of years. Are you saying that now our homeland is Palestine, when I'd much rather live in Britain than Palestine, man? I mean, I think the majority of people would. So it was a way also, Zionism was not only supported by Jews, it was also supported by anti-Semites, because also to get rid of what they considered their Jewish problem in their countries. And in particularly
It
Eastern
really.
European, particularly the Eastern European refugees coming in. So once again, this is not monolithic. So if you took a snapshot in 1917, I would say the vast majority of Jewish people were against Zionism. And for also other reasons, because a lot of them came from more of a social democrat and socialist background. And the idea of another settler colonial endeavor was anathema to many of them. Others, it was for religious reasons. Like the really orthodox ones believed, and still today you see this, they believe that, the Messiah can only, the whole state of, the reestablishment of the state has to be organic and not forced, basically. And what this whole...
Okay, so let me ask this, because we have a lot of people who are commenting all over the world here, as this is a very in-depth discussion with Matthew Millan, who I'm suspecting could be a time traveler too. After all, it's very detailed, and I'm enjoying this.
I wish, man. So.
Yes, I think I might have seen him in the old black and white photos. But before we get to the creation of Israel, I want to kind of harp on this for a minute. Why was there such a demonization of the Jews in Germany? A lot of people have asked, and now I'm asking, why was there a book burning in Germany? And what were those books? Because the alternative discovery as of late has been because the Jewish doctors and business, the upper class, I guess you could say, were doing gender reassignment of children and everybody at that time in the 30s, if you can believe it. And a lot of the books that were being burned were books related to a lot of those perversions. What's the word on that aspect?
I've never heard anything about it, but what I can tell you is I could go back to the late around 1918, 1919 in Italy, because I mean the story of fascism has to start there, because fascism is an old it comes from fascia, which means bundle of sticks, and I think it was a term that Mussolini himself coined. But I want to go through a list of some of the characteristics of fascism, if you don't mind.
Okay, so yes, please do so. This is key because it gets tossed around so easily on cable news, and that's why I can't watch cable news anymore.
Well, yeah, people don't
not good for my health.
Well, people don't quite understand it, and what I'm going to do is give a list that Italian author Umberto Eco, who was born in fascist Italy.
Okay, please do.
So, and I'm giving this one, I want to, because there's a lot of controversy about this list. Not everybody agrees upon it. But what it points out is that fascism is, I think I told you this before in a conversation, Dean, that fascism is actually a mass psychology response. like what I said before, like a severely autistic kid lashing out. It's kind of like a mass psychology version of that. So I wanted to go through this list quickly
Oh,
because
let's go through it. Yes.
it also, at first, it stemmed from the rising nationalist movements, which Zionism came out of the same exact cauldron. So this first, you have an idea of the cult of tradition, like looking back, and you kind of revere like a past that often didn't exist. Do you know what I mean? Like for instance, Mussolini revered the Roman times. And the idea was to try to also reestablish the great Roman Empire, reestablish that lost, also what uh, uh, the Nazis did in Germany too. There's a feeling of a loss of their greatness. And so this cult of tradition says to go back and try to grab the mojo of our past, glories, whether it was the Germans with their empire in the late 1800s, the early 1900s, or the Teutonic Knights and all that, or what it is, Italy with the Roman Empire. There's also this rejection of modernism to some degree, where I don't know if you've heard terms like decadent, how society is becoming decadent, which is very
Right.
common, which is, it's not only fascists. Keep in mind that not only fascists believe these things, but when you add up the list, it kind of bundles into what
Right.
fascism is.
The modern, like the modern art movement that took over in the 70s, very infiltrated by the Central Intelligence and got rid of the classics. And I could see the disdain for it, but that's interesting that disdain existed all the way back then as well.
Oh, I mean, it's existed for time immemorial, but also that there's this cult of action for action's sake, which it's connected to like the rise of anti-intellectualism and things like that. But it's like, like the idea that you have to do something. It's kind of a strange phenomenon, and it makes absolutely no sense on its own. But as we go through these characteristics, you start seeing a pattern. Any disagreement with the party is considered treason. So there's no room for argumentation. There's no room for any argumentation. There's
And
also
so we're describing fascism and not marriage, everybody, just to be clear on that.
yeah. I mean, I think
Yes.
once again,
Just to be clear.
number four could be identified as a characteristic of marriage as well. So then we have a fear of difference. There's always an other. There's always this outside. Like the barbarians at the gate, that kind of idea, or like with groups within the society that are different. And it's also, there's always the next one is there's always an appeal to a middle class that feels grievances, and particularly say in Germany, in the Roaring '20s, there was that feeling, especially when the stock market crashed. The middle class just had the trap door open from under them. So there's also there's this weird thing where the enemies of the fascists are both subhuman and weak, and also like this overwhelming force. Does that make sense? That they're strong and weak at the same time. It's a contradictory type of belief.
Sounds like, yeah, Al Qaeda, ISIS. We lived through all this stuff. In the modern times.
That's actually a good description. Saying Al Qaeda is both, they're these weak backward guys fighting, making improvised explosives, but at the same time, you hear some of the people saying that, they're invading us with Sharia law, like as if they could. Like it's I mean, yeah, the empires that invade everybody, they always say that about the people in other areas too. So there's also this idea of an obsession with plots. There's always the new plot, this plot to destroy whether it's the Reichstag fire or whatever. There's always a plot. That's
Right.
That's one of the most important characteristics of fascism, actually. And
Yeah,
also,
a lot of self-inflicted wounds to justify the wars
yeah,
it's the spark, which is
yeah.
now
I mean, once
underway.
again,
So
we and the United States in a lot of ways we've seen obsession with plots or with false flag events like the Gulf of Tonkin, for instance, or Gulf of Tonkin. That'd be better described as using a miscommunication to their advantage.
wait a
So,
minute, that wasn't real. Man, it's amazing what you find out. Continue,
pacifism.
please. Yes.
Pacifism is tracking with the enemy. That's a very important one. Pacifists are considered weak and need to be destroyed. Which goes to the next one is a complete contempt for the weak, which is why you see, one of the things that's not talked about is the hundreds of thousands of, mentally challenged people who were murdered by the Nazis. Because there's a complete weakness. There's an idea like the nation is a body. The nation is a living body, and the weak on it are cancerous. Does that make sense? And so the idea is to cut out anybody who's weak for the sake of the nation.
And where have we seen that? The pandemic, everybody. We've seen the people who are going to be the government assistants. They got rolled out the miracle jabs first. The elderly, the hanger-oners, the people with the pensions. We've heard about this for a long time. So yeah, it's existed for quite a while.
I mean, yeah. And then there's there's a cult of death where everybody's kind of educated to become a hero. You see this very much in Israel right now. And it's funny, what I've noticed, they also always say we celebrate life and they celebrate death when they're the ones that kind of celebrate death. You know what I mean? And then
Right.
there's severe machismo. It's
Yes.
very high. It's very hierarchical. It's very
testosterone. Yeah.
But also fascism also tends to see that women say belong as childbearers. And then
right.
Selective populism. This idea that there's a common will of the people, and the fascists are the representative of that, particularly the fascist leader like Mussolini or Hitler. And then the last one is newspeak, which it's kind of like an impoverished vocabulary. They use a lot of snappy catch terms, which, like when you hear like bullet point things when they don't really give you that much information.
Like, they hate us for our freedom. They hate us for our freedom.
That's newspeak right there. That's a perfect example of it. So anyway, this is kind of like what Mussolini. Mussolini came out of the socialist movements of the early 20th century, and what he decided was that socialism didn't tackle the issues properly, and that a much stronger nationalism, was necessary. And then that kind of led into the cult of tradition, for one, going back, we need to bring back the Roman Empire. And so what he ended up doing was, Italy had invaded Libya in 1911 before Mussolini took over in, I think, 1920. However, he reestablished the war in Libya in the 1920s, and it was brutal. And he invaded Crete. He also invaded Ethiopia. So what's very important about the fascists too, they're expansionist movements. It's kind of like a locust population, that they have this idea of the living space. You probably heard that a lot with the Germans, the Sudetenland that they needed to get back.
Right.
They need the living space, so they need to.
And who was the major Matt? Who was the major superpower during this time, the 20s, 30s? Was it the U.S. yet, or was it Germany?
It was United. It was Great Britain.
England.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. It was England.
I mean, Great Britain had probably the largest empire to have ever existed. I mean,
so there you have it. It was Great Britain after all. So now we hear about Mussolini, the taking over the war during these weak times of others. We see that happening now during the pandemic. We saw a lot of China land grabbing. Definitely, you've seen Israel do it for the past 25 years. But we'll get back to Israel. So now we're sitting at this World War II precipice. Now, is Mussolini in contact with Adolfo at this time? Are there these
Yeah.
unities and beginning, and what does
Well,
that
so for
consist
one,
of? And where does Japan lie in the mix here? Because that seems far off from the table.
Hitler really admired Mussolini for what he did. I mean, 'cause for one, the sheer audacity of how Mussolini took over Italy was he basically led what were called his black shirts, and into street conflicts with everybody, a lot of murders, and then at one point he led a march onto Rome with a bunch of black shirts, and he basically was handed the keys to Italy at that point. So I mean, and so Hitler really admired his audacity, but at the same time, Mussolini was really inspired by the consolidation of power that Hitler was able to do in 1933, and also
Yeah.
Mussolini's fascism up to that point was actually fairly agnostic toward Jewish people. It was only when Hitler took power when Italy also adopted the severe anti-Semitism that you saw with Germany in the 30s.
Interesting.
So,
And
yeah.
now during the war, I'm trying to think what troops were fighting Italy. Was it England at that time
Yeah,
during World
so
War II?
Italy was in the Africa campaign, so England fought them and defeated them
Okay,
in Germany in the Battle of El Alamein, which kind of broke the back
really
of the German and the Axis powers in Africa. But keep in mind, also Romania was fighting on the Axis, and Croatia was allies with the Axis at the time.
interesting.
So actually,
Uh,
Croatia, part of when we go up to the 1990s and the Serbian massacres of Croatians and Bosnians, a lot of it stems from the grievance because in World War II, Serbians were put into concentration camps. And
okay, Serbians. Interesting.
yeah, so what you're seeing is a complete, what you see over and over with fascist movements is a weaponization of grievance. And what you're seeing is Israel, which I would say is a fascist society, is a complete and total weaponization of trauma from the Holocaust. And and any reasonable
Okay,
person would say, if
that's
you're
interesting. Interesting.
because you're doesn't any reasonable person would say because you or your grandparents or whatever were victims doesn't give you the right to be uh, an oppressor, right? Any reasonable
Well,
person would see that.
right. You
But
would think, Matt, we have a break coming up here, but this is what I want to get into. When we get back, I'm going to field some of everybody's questions. A lot of people are very interested and in love with your garb tonight, Matt.
okay, yeah, I'll
And
explain. You want
well,
me to explain that
we
too?
well when we get back, he's going to explain it, and he might have thought the Halloween party was tonight, but I don't think that's the case. So stand by there, Matt, if you can, as when we return here, we have some interesting subjects, and topics, and segments as well to get into, and we're going to be touching upon uh, in the wake of World War II and get to present day. Why was it Palestine that it was picked, and why were the displacement of the German Jewish communities? Why were they not sent into places throughout Europe where they were from? How did this just Middle Eastern country get picked? In the same regard that I ask, how did the Somalis wind up in Minnesota? There's a reason for the season. And what exactly was it that the Catholic Church did, the Vatican, to truly piss off the Jews and the Zionist Jews, who deem them more of a credible threat than the Muslims? And where do the Muslims stand in all this? There's some very interesting things. And then we're going to also uh, kind of cherry pick around the world and find out what the hell was going on during that World War II era. So you're listening to Late Night Thoughts here, our original audio podcast here by Real Deal Media. But we're going to take this quick little break and get back and get more in depth with Matthew Millan, historian, filmmaker, and boy, am I learning things here tonight. See you on the other side. Stand by, if you could.
He called them suckers and losers. Who in the hell does he think he is? Who does he think he is?
Who does he think he is, Sean Gregorian? Who does that guy think he is?
Well,
who does Sean think he is? Oh, man. It's best to say he was muted. We have Lena Star Moon, who might know what the deal is. She said, that's a deep thought, Sean. It's so deep, we can't even measure it. How deep it is. Oh, Maddie Lynn, who says, baby Sean, yes, Sean is a baby. He needs to be pampered. And how's that diaper rash?
I just don't understand the attacks. I just don't understand the attacks. Some people in the chat are saying doublespeak. That's ridiculous. You're either a pawn working for somebody or you're with the devil himself in the dark side. Shut your mouth.
Okay, we are back. Listen to that. All right, we are back. Late Night Thoughts is returned, finally, officially. I'd like to say we never left, but that's easier said than done. Anyways, hopefully your trip to the snack bar was as fruitful and valuable as me. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I'm still Dean Ryan here, your late night thoughtful host here. As we're getting into some of the things that were never shared with us, talked about, because it's our history. We were dragged into foreign wars, even if they were called world wars, twice, and we're now getting dragged into a third. So to understand the culprits, the sociopaths, and the enemies, you have to learn who the enemies are. You have to learn the motives, the history, or we're going to be doomed to repeat the same mistakes as the lemmings did during these times. So I'm going to welcome back to the stage here a man who is, well, he dresses like this around the house, and why should he change just for us? Matt Millan, historian, filmmaker. Hey, Matt, we have a wonderful question I thought I'd bring to your attention stemming from Rumble. I was thinking this same kind of ordeal here subconsciously, but this is from Rebel Mama, who asked, Matt, what about Argentina? Have you heard the truth about Evita? What about that, Matt? You want to talk about Evita? And, I saw the movie in the theater, but I didn't think too much of it. What about Argentina in general and Evita and her whole role and place into this?
I mean, I don't know very much about. I remember we did focus on Perón in college. I do remember that in my totalitarian class that I took, because he was very much a totalitarian leader, but he got deposed later, when he came back in power, by a military junta that was probably even much worse than him. So, but I don't know that much about Evita, although she was, I mean, Argentina's version of Eva Braun, I guess you could say.
Yeah, so there you have that one. And at the time, the president of Argentina was very fond of the German persuasion, so much so that the president today, Millan, finally said what the whole world knew for quite some time, that Hitler did escape the World War II conclusion and did flee to Argentina, where he spent his remainder of his years. I'm not sure he's alive today. I wouldn't know how old he would be, but that was certainly confirmed.
40-some years old now. He was born in 1888, I think. So he's long gone.
Oh, well, it's a stretch. I don't know if he made it. Yeah, I don't know many people. So there's that one for you. Thank you for the question. That's very special.
Really sorry I can't give much more. I just don't know very much about it.
Okay, here we have one more question here, and we'll get back to it. We have Claudine, who said, "See the movie with Madonna." Yeah, I saw the movie with my grandmother. Made me go to the movie to see that one. But look, there was a popular song. She did okay in that one, from what I recollect. Okay, so thank you for that. Here is this one here. We have Patsy Rourke. Thank you, Patsy. Says, "Don't forget the USARY that
she means usury."
Okay, that affected the Germans.
The
okay.
Interest. So basically, charging with interest.
Okay, got it. Thank you, Patsy, for that one. Let's see. Okay, here's a good point, and then we'll get back on the wagon here. Claudine says, "The Vatican is behind that too." That's interesting. So, we're talking about Mussolini, and where's the Vatican's role in Italy and kind of the world at that point too? Because they've always, at least in modern times, have been against the human suffering across the globe. That's kind of been the motto statement. So where do they lie about in this time of world history?
It was a different time. For one, which is funny, though, because especially in the early 1900s, Mussolini was very anti-religion. Mussolini was a huge fan of Nietzsche at the time. And so, but later when Mussolini took power, he successfully courted the church. So and I think he reestablished some powers for the Vatican as well, if I'm not mistaken. And so you'd say that, I mean, the actual papacy shared some degree of complicity with the fascist consolidation of power in Italy.
Interesting.
It was a different time. So
yes, it was. Yeah, they got that. Okay, let's get back on the wagon here, as we were talking about things in the wake of World War II. But it's worth noting too. I was shocked to learn that Canada got into World War II before the Americans. Not a lot of people know that. They entered the war in 1941. What was the Canadian reasoning for entering that war? Because it wasn't their Pearl Harbor.
They were a Commonwealth country, so there's still some major connection. They still acknowledge the Queen, for instance. So
right, that's right. And Australia was in the war as well. A lot of they had their Australian Day. Yeah, so that's true. Before the Five Eyes, it was the Queen. All right, so there's that factor. Just to kind of round up World War II, there's Japan. We hear about Japan, but only in the end we hear about Japan. That's a weird kind of connection they had with Germany at one point. How did they come about? You had the emperor, and you had the occupation of the Pacific Islanders.
And also
what
China.
was that whole about? So,
well,
go ahead, Matt.
Japan was extremely expansionist at that point. Even though, I don't know if you knew this, in World War I, Japan and Italy actually fought on the side of the Allies. So everything got, everything got reversed, or things got reversed a little bit by World War II. But Japan, from the 20s, well, from even earlier, was very much expansionist. I mean, their empire started gaining ground when they defeated Russia in 1906 in the Sea of Oshkosh. There was a major, I think it wasn't a very long war, but Japan crushed Russia, which really started the establishment of their empire growing. And from that point onward, Japan just whittled away at the Southeast Asia until they occupied China and did some of the probably the grimmest things you could possibly do to a population, including biological warfare, infecting people with plague, to go along with just general genocide that was committed against the Chinese. You've probably heard of the rape of Nanking, for instance. That's one of the most egregious examples of it. So, you mentioned the Philippines as well.
Yes, go ahead.
Don't forget, you're totally right about that. The Philippine people, and also keep in mind the Philippines were pretty much annexed by the United States, and they fought a long guerrilla war against the United States in the late 1800s and early 1900s.
Well, they were also allies in World War I. Theodore Roosevelt called them our little brown brothers, if you recall, with Rommel. But then, okay, so there's all these things happening, and you have things happening in Latin America that we're not privy of all of us knowing, but Argentina was a very rich country. The old token saying is riches in Argentine was a real thing. The Argentine gold, Argentine steaks. So it would be natural Germany went there. And after the war, you have Italy that's now fighting against the British. And now, who were the French fighting, kind of as we kind of round off here?
That's an interesting one, because the French were allied with the English, what we call the Allies. But the French, in the sneak attack in the Ardennes, and there was something called the Maginot Line, which was a big static, like fortress line going throughout France. Yes. Because the French learned that defensive warfare worked in World War I, but they didn't take into account tanks in World War II. And so the Germans, war was declared in 1939 when Germany invaded Poland. And keep in mind, Germany the year before annexed Czechoslovakia, and war should have been declared then, but it wasn't, because the cowardice, you could say the cowardice of Neville Chamberlain, I guess. But the French were ill prepared. The French and the English were ill prepared, and it would have been a different story if the English were not able to escape Dunkirk in 1940. So, the beaches at Dunkirk, there was one of the greatest evacuations in history. So the British forces basically spared. But at that point, France was overwhelmed, and a puppet government was set up in Vichy, France, a place called Vichy, France. That's why you hear the Vichy government. And they were a puppet government of the Germans. So they would round up French resistance collaborators and things like that. And they also...
Okay, so this is France too, by the way. And this is before, or this is slightly there. This is after Napoleon had his reign and the Louisiana Purchase. And, that's pretty historic at that time.
This is 1940 when France was defeated.
Oh, got it.
Yeah. So.
And China at this time was just kind of a mainland, a lot of huge farm country, I'm imagining, until about 1949, the installment of Mao Zedong by the CIA. So 1948, onward, the next couple of years are very crucial, like 1947 onward, very crucial. So the war ends 1945. Stalin is somewhat seen as an ally. We all remember those famous photos of him, FDR, and Mr. Churchill, who bombed India. I think this is, everyone's taken land at this time, and certainly England was no exception.
Well,
they were taking more of a colonial power.
England had controlled India for a long time. I mean, keep in mind.
What was the bombing campaign for? Why was there a bombing campaign done by Churchill in India?
There were a couple of them. There was the Amritsar massacre as well. Was that 1990?
Okay.
I can't remember. But it was because India was pushing for self-governance. That's where Gandhi's whole non-violent movement was pushing for liberation from the colonial power of England. And
that's right.
England and America tend to do this. They act as if they're the benevolent empires. But under England's rule of India, I think something like 80 to 100 million people starved to death in just 100 years, from like 1800 to 1900.
Well, that's terrible. And, if I had to live in India, I'd starve to death too. It's pretty grim, as you said earlier, with the food is. Still to this day, it's very grim and unhygienic. But so that's kind of the picture of everything in China. So now we have the end of World War II, and for some reason, and I'm paraphrasing what you shared with me, is now the leaders of Europe, which this sentiment still continues to this day. They don't want the displaced Jews coming through their city. And what is the reasoning? And then why would they stick them in the Middle East with the Arabs, a place where the Queen of Spain told Chris Columbus, hey, we're tired of trading and going through the Middle East, find another route. Because, that's pretty ruthless and a different culture back then.
Well,
why would they pick the Middle East?
For one, also, the Europeans saying the Middle East is a ruthless place is pretty funny, because the amount of wars that were happening in Europe from the Middle Ages onward was on a far superior, vaster scale than anything in the Middle East. But so the reason Middle East was picked, during the first Zionist Congress, I think it was like in the late 1890s, like 1898, with Herzl, and they were actually debating on where they were going to establish their homeland. And one of the other candidates was Uganda. And there was Madagascar. There were a couple others. And actually, Herzl was a little more, agnostic about Palestine. He was actually in contact with this I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a historian, Rashid Khalidi. One of his ancestors, Herzl, was writing to him. So once again, Herzl was agnostic about that, but there were many, I think they voted in the early 1900s that they were going to focus on Palestine. Because it was the Jewish homeland. The irony of that is a lot of these guys didn't even believe, they weren't practicing Judaism at all. Many of them were atheists, and Herzl was an atheist.
Well, yeah. And that still continues to this day. Netanyahu is a atheist, and then you get into the creation of it. That brings us Lord Timothy Rothschild and the Rothschild family. That said they put I believe the Abraham Accords. Am I getting that right? Or the Noahide laws? I'm so backwards.
They were actually good friends with Balfour, which is funny that Lord Balfour you've heard of the Balfour Declaration, I'm sure. Lord Balfour was he was a total anti-Semite. But one thing, he liked the idea of a Jewish homeland for another thing, because they had their eyes on the Ottoman Empire. World War I was coming to a close, and how to carve up the Ottoman Empire. And they thought the idea of having a Jewish state there that was basically influenced by Britain's colonial might as the preeminent empire in the world. A puppet, like a puppet regime there. So
I'd be remiss if I didn't bring these two facts up, which I should have by now. So the World War One gave us the League of Nations, which you think with that it would prevent more. Well, then we had World War Two, which then gave us the United Nations.
And
And
you would think would prevent war, and then here we are. So,
you see the theme here, everybody. It's always the opposite. So it's the United Nations is really the divided nations. The Patriot Act is very the unpatriot act.
well,
It's
also
like,
the problem is the colonial powers still control the United Nations. The Security
So-
Council is all the old colonial powers.
okay.
Russia,
So
United States,
the
and now
UN the UN comes into play in the play about 1947. Within a year's time, they're now invading Palestine, and it's not like you might have heard the pilgrims, coming to meet the Indians for, break bread. You're talking butchery, massacres, concentration, and everything you can think of, rapes, and the guy's talking about it. And a lot of the people and soldiers that did that, their kids wound up going into very high positions of power within governments in Israel and the United States. One of them being Rahm Emanuel.
Not only that, Menachem Begin, he was the leader of a terrorist organization called the Irgun, who was responsible for the bombing of the King David Hotel in 1946, which killed 96 people. He used to brag that he was the father of modern terrorism. He became prime minister. And when Israel invaded Lebanon and oversaw the Sabra and the Shatila massacres in 1982, guess who was prime minister? This terrorist named Menachem Begin.
So that's where it came from. That's why, okay, I'll have to tell you later. But okay, so this is happening. 1948 comes.
I think even go back. So Britain started getting cold feet because there was an Arab rebellion from 1936 to 1939 that was very costly, and Britain ended up killing a lot of Arabs. I mean, it was it actually broke the back of Arab resistance. But then Britain decided that that I think it was called the White Papers. They decided that the mandate was a bad idea, and then establishing a Jewish state there was a bad idea. So throughout World War II,
what country was this? What country?
This is United Kingdom. This is actually Britain. So
okay,
they got cold feet basically, and so throughout World War II, they obviously for obvious reasons put it on the back burner because they were trying to survive. So. And then,
Matt, you just connected a major piece, by the way. I don't know if you're aware of this. What you just said there in that British history of, so you had Arabs within the country of England, and they're getting too radical.
Oh, no, this was in Palestine. No, this was in Palestine.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Palestine.
Yeah.
So they're getting radical. Then this would make sense why British intelligence creates in 1932 the Muslim Brotherhood. So just like we see with ISIS, like we see in Al-Qaeda, with Zbigniew Brzezinski creating Al-Qaeda in 1979, which means the base. Yeah. Well, it all stemmed from England. Interesting.
And keep in mind, the Arab Rebellion happened because the Palestinians wanted to self-governance. They wanted to determine their future themselves. Because, nobody likes a colonial power telling you what to do. And you're not even a citizen of where you live. So, but England had cold feet, and so three major this is before Israel, three major Jewish terrorist organizations developed. One of them was the Stern Gang, Lehi. The other was Haganah was the first one, and then I think that was established by Jabotinsky. I could be wrong on that, but then Irgun was an offshoot on that, and then the Stern Gang. They were called the Stern Gang because they were bandits. And they actually, get this, there's an interesting history here. The Stern Gang, Avram Stern, the leader, actually tried to contact von Ribbentrop, the Nazi German ambassador, and to make a deal that the Jews would be expelled, but they would be expelled to Palestine. There's actually documentation of this. It's pretty wild when you think about it. Of course, in defense of the Stern Gang, even though I'm loath to defend those terrorists, but they didn't know about the final solution, obviously. I think this was like 1941. But these three terrorist groups gained a lot of power, and they murdered a lot of civilians. And that they ended up becoming the Israeli army. And in 1947 and 1948, after the partition, they're the ones that started, we're doing the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. 750,000 Palestinians by 1948 were cleansed out of Palestine. And basically, Gaza was a refugee camp. So many of the Palestinians were pushed into Gaza. So the descendants that lived from Gaza are descendants of refugees just from 1948 and from 1967, because another 250,000 Palestinians were ethnically cleansed in 1967 after the 6-Day War.
Okay, we have a question here. This is really good stuff here. Here is Claudine, who's really on fire here tonight. Thank you, Claudine, for being here. Are Jews Polish, or are Polish Jews like Netanyahu?
Well, that's where his
that's a good
family's
question.
From. Well, actually, his family is, I think their real name is Milikowski, and his grandfather changed it to a Hebrew name, which you see a lot. David Ben-Gurion's actual name is David Grun. So what you're seeing is the Ashkenazis, and many of them came from Poland, Russia, Belarus, the Eastern Europe. That's because also, once again, the English Jews, most of them had no desire to leave England. Why would you leave England? So,
Matt, you have some criticism. Are you open to that? Would you like to take on some criticism?
Fine. Yeah.
Okay. Just because I like to see you, I like to see you dance here. Let's see this.
Swerve a little bit.
It's amazing what television or radio can do now. Okay, here's Celtic girl who says, Japanese people in culture are amazing. I love them. I like how Matt ignores how every country has done the worst atrocities throughout history, but is extremely selective who he chooses to highlight.
Oh, I'd like to select them all. If I could, I could.
We just don't have the time. Yeah, we
just don't have the time, but that's a very good point. I can go through, the Rwanda genocide, which I was going to do a film on that. I was working with people going to do a film on that. I can do.
He sounds extremely racist. He sounds extremely racist towards Japanese people, but calls every other culture.
I'm actually no. I'm certainly not racist against Japanese.
It's hilarious. She says.
I'm just telling you what happened before World War II.
She says, "Bye." Yeah. Don't worry, Celtic girl. I won't let him get away with it. Look at him sidestepping. We won't let him get away with it. Go ahead.
No, I was just explaining. I was just explaining exactly what happened in World War II. At least as far as
I know. She came in late. Here's the deal: we have a limited amount of time. We're talking about the bigger participants in World War II with some of the side participants as well. But now we're moving on. So she got in here late. And no, Matt loves Japanese. He goes to geisha houses all the time. I've seen him. Okay, so let's move on to that.
When we're talking about these empires, I just want to point out something.
Yeah.
That the people within the empires are victims themselves, whether they also are the ones that are the arms of the empire, doing the atrocities. That we, the grunts, the regular people. So the average Japanese soldier was completely victimized by this authoritarian regime that controlled them. Absolutely victimized. And then I would also say, Celtic girl should say this, I think one of the greatest injustices was actually dropping the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That price.
I agree to that too.
200,000 people in one go. Which goes also to the many injustices. Yeah. So.
Thank you for saying that too. And if I could add to that, we had Albert Einstein at the time petitioning Truman with other mads, and Albert Einstein was a Zionist too, I believe, and petitioning him to drop the bomb. Which
he was anti-Zionist actually.
Okay, I stand corrected. He was anti-Zionist, but he got that whole movement go, which started a huge arms race and gave us the Cold War. But that's a whole nother topic.
He absolutely
and I highly
regretted that
recommend.
too. Yeah, he totally regretted
I
that
would
too.
imagine. And is it true that the guy who dropped the bomb in the plane took a cyanide pill after because he couldn't live with himself?
I don't think so. I don't remember the guy's name, and the Enola Gay,
Okay.
the pilot.
Yeah,
There was the Enola Gay and Boxcar. Boxcar went.
see. I'm
Boxcar
also
was,
probably thinking of the movie Memphis Belle, which it
I love
is.
that movie, by the way.
It was a
love
great
that
movie. Me too. Matthew Modine and Carrot Top was in it. Believe it or not.
And Harry Connick Jr. Man.
Harry Connick Jr. It was a great movie. Okay, so we're kind of winding down to the bare bones here. So we're learning what's happening about all these different groups. The Stern Gang. You have a lot of the Jews now taking German surnames. You have the Japanese surrendering.
They're taking Hebrew surnames. I mean,
okay, so they're taking just a lot of different names, and so now we have we understand how Palestine became of a selected target and place to reside. So now that kind of brings us to modern day. I know we're leapfrogging a vast amount of decades, and but definitely Germany's never been the same. Because of World War II, it gave us the creation of NATO, which Germany's not allowed to have a standing army since World War II. We also have, right? Am I correct on that?
That's no longer. No, Germany now has a standing army. So
you almost said Journey.
Yeah, Journey.
Thank you.
Journey has a standing army.
Journey has that wheel in the sky, but so they have a stand. But for a long time they didn't. Then you have 1954 now, the creation of the EU, the European Union, which they try to model after the U.S. They think it would help for trade and create peace. And I'm not sure how great that worked. The Pope sat at the head of that agreement. That was kind of weird. Then we learned much later from our EU insider, it was done for trafficking and black market purposes. And, that's always the case. So now we have modern day Israel. Okay, so let's take us up to speed now. Is now we're at a place where Americans are learning, and Jewish Americans and a lot of people around the world, that Israel their existence is solely based on the subsidizing at behest of the United States taxpayer, American taxpayer. Where do you see things today, Matt? What is the conflict now, and is there any resolution to it? And then I want to save your final thought of how this whole thing is going to end, because we're at that point now of World War III.
There's no resolution to it until Palestinians have a right of self-determination, whether that comes in the form of one state where everybody has equal rights, because the two-state solution now is done and dusted. I mean, the West Bank is so carved up. Gaza is completely laid to waste. You've seen pictures of it, Dean. There's virtually nothing left of Gaza. It's just mounds of rubble. And so, but then what you see in Trump's 20-point peace plan, it never says anything about self-determination for the Palestinians except aspirations. And what the hell does that mean? So what these clowns are trying to do is go march us back to October 6th. But It's impossible, because the mass murder of scores of thousands of people has been committed. You can't walk that back. And Israel still is in a murder frenzy mode. We've seen this in Rwanda. We've seen this with the Serbians in Srebrenica in Bosnia, that once you get to that, you can't just go back out of it, because it's like a locust swarm at this point.
Well,
you just can.
And if I could add too, is we have the UN. What's the whole point of the United Nations? They're just wagging their finger. They have troops. Why didn't they put a stop to this? And furthermore, what about the International Criminal Court? They issued things to Trudeau and Bush, and nothing ever happens.
Yeah.
Why does nothing ever happen to stop these people in the
as,
modern era?
I'm as pissed off as you are, Dean. I think the United Nations has one Achilles heel that'll ever keep it from doing the right thing in like this position, is it can't, because of the Security Council. The Security Council is the former colonial powers in the United States and Russia and China. I mean, and one veto means you destroy the whole, any chance of it. So the United Nations is hamstrung by the colonial powers. What do you think they did? They weighted the dice, man. This is exactly what they do. This is exactly what the empires have been doing for 500 years, man. It's just now it comes in a more kinder, gentler, friendlier face, but it's still the same horseshit.
Let me ask you this: what is it about Iran that Israel really has a real just stick up their yarmulke about? What is it about Iran that just they have such disdain for?
For one, it's the proxy battles that they've been fighting with each other over the last 30 or so years. But I want to keep in mind something. Yes, Iran has done actions through proxy like Hezbollah and things like that, but Iran hasn't really invaded anybody. Israel's invaded everybody around them. The United States has invaded how many countries? And they're the ones that are lecturing us that Iran is the existential threat. Who are the ones with nuclear powers? In fact, Israel and the United States have nuclear weapons. In fact, if I were Iran, of course, if you're rational, you'd want nuclear weapons, right? I mean, think about it. If you have nuclear weapons, will you be continually bullied like this? North Korea doesn't get bullied.
Well, Matt, you sound like a Iranian apologist, and until you disavow the Guard and Hamas, and I say that too because you can't have this discussion on mainstream media anywhere. You know what I'm saying? And this is what I've said about Piers Morgan. He's ruthless. He's not many people like him, but he's the only kind of mainstream persona in the beginning of this whole October 7th thing that provided a platform to a lot of these ideas and voices, love them or hate them. And we need more of it, Matt.
Yeah, because, one, the Iranian regime is, fuck them. They're a bunch of assholes. But that's not the point. Iran hasn't, Iran internationally has acted rationally. It hasn't invaded anybody. Yeah, they're terrible to their own people. Everybody knows that. And I have no love lost for them. Just like I don't have any love lost for the Muslim Brotherhood because I dealt with those assholes. I don't have any, but at the same time, just because I don't have any love lost for them doesn't mean that I'm not going to be rational about it. And look at who the real aggressors are here. The real aggressors are the United States and Israel. That's as clear
Matt,
as day.
you're speaking like an adult, and that's very rare in this day and age. So here's let me tell you. And we have a lot of people commenting too. Here's Blue Sky. Thank you, Blue Sky, for being here tonight. She says the following: I appreciate Matt participating tonight, but what he's saying is textbook. If Jim was here tonight, this conversation would have taken a whole different direction. No, well, even if it is textbook in some regard, these are things that kind of put things into perspective of how the formations are happening right now. And let me add to that, Matt, is because right now, as we are now at the border of Russia, we as NATO and UN, this is how I see things going, is that, okay, we have, there's an effort of Israel. They want to go into Iran like yesterday. And tell me if you agree or if you want to add on to it, but they can't go in there and the U.S. can't go in there. We're not as the high mighty military as we might, beat our chest.
No, Iran.
We can't go
Iran is
in
a
the
different kettle of fish than Iraq. I mean,
well, and they have high-tech weaponry that they've got from China. But here's what I'm saying: their allies are with Russia and China, and we can't. There's not going to be a war with Iran without dealing with them. So they have to weaken Russia first with the Mossad asset of Zelensky in that war, and they have to weaken China with their sinking economy and all these 300% tariffs. And Venezuela is a Chinese-Russian stronghold. That's why I think no matter what evidence they produce to saying, no, we weren't putting people in your country, it was Ben Shapiro. Trump doesn't want to hear it because he knows that's a proxy state for China and Russia. And then the rise of BRICS too is it's a threat to the dollar, the Federal Reserve notes.
I'd also say what a joke that a far right provocateur gets the Nobel Peace Prize. You know, one thing I have no love lost for Maduro and Chavez. I think they were pretty awful, but one thing you've got to say that right-wing authoritarian governments are generally even much grimmer in South America, and that's what she would have represented. So I'm fairly certain.
Right. And then we have, well, we know Hugo Chavez, so he dies by a cancer poke. Same with that Argentine president. But so this is how I see it: is we are fighting proxy states, and ultimately, China's in a proxy war with Israel as the leaders of the new 21st century. Who's it going to be, Israel or China? And Israel's making their move in Canada. They're making the move in Australia with the anti-Semitic speech laws. We have a guy in prison in Canada because of that, who, oddly enough, was put in there.
How absurd is this, man? It just boggles my mind how absurd this is, that this little country that is like it's a parasite, man. I hate to say it. I know that, I don't like saying it that way, but you know what I mean, that it's using parasitism, and especially through the proxies of American politicians and the political elite who are in on it. Don't get me wrong. And also the weapons industries and all this. And it's just.
Israel is the golden goose for the defense contractors.
You know that wasp? There's a certain wasp that takes over the minds of beetles and uses the beetles to either protect their larvae or even to lay eggs. You know what I'm talking about? It's called like the zombie wasp. This is like the parallel I see. This is like when I'm looking at an animal analogy is what I'm seeing. I actually wrote an article on that called The Wasp and the Beetle on that. And
I was thinking of that one. Yeah.
Well, let me get this straight though. Like when I'm saying these analogies, we're dealing with people, and people are both can do, we're Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? That we're capable of these wonderful acts of altruism and compassion, but we're also capable of just unspeakable evil. And all of us. So what we see in Israel, we're seeing a mirror of ourselves. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's a lot of what's around us is reflection from, and some of it is also projection, and then it becomes reflection. You can certainly see it in the culture. Listen to any of the music these kids are listening to, and you would think that you're in the the ninth gate of hell in some of this music. But let me kind of in a closing way here, and then I'll add what I feel too is, what are your thoughts? Right now we have North Korean troops in Russia willing to protect the homeland over there. We have China who's putting weaponry in Iran. We have Iran and Antarctica out of all places. Are we going to have a World War III, battle of all battles here? Because the case has been made that the purpose of Israel was to give us the final third world war, which would then give us that global government that they so want. Where do you see this going? What is the end game, Matthew Millan?
I think we're plain brinksmanship. All sides are, and I include. I mean, there's no good guys. That's the first thing I'm going to say, Dean. Russia, the amount of people they killed in Chechnya, for instance. I mean, Putin's got a lot of blood in his hands. There are no good guys here. The United States have clearly shown they're not good guys. Germany, France, the United Kingdom, all the media and all their media proxies. Look how they're quick. How FIFA threw Russia out, of FIFA tournaments immediately. Yet what Israel's doing is even on a scale greater. Israel's attacking people that had homemade weapons, man. And then so it's just on another level of depravity, and it's on another level of I mean, this is the maybe, I mean, in percentage wise, probably the percentage of population, this is so far the preeminent genocide of the 21st century, yet the media glosses that over. So the one thing that suggests to me is the Western powers and the media, they look at these people as brown people. They're racist. And it's the typical colonial shit that you would have seen in the 19th century, and it hasn't left. And this is my big disappointment, because are we literally living in the 19th century anymore? Well, psychologically, it appears we are. So I thought we could get beyond all this shit.
Well, you know what? I think that this newer generation, just to be the optimist here, I think this is the last bout we're having with the food poisoning of Zionism. You have the young Jews of today that are not only hiding their names now, as 40% that were polled saying they don't want to just openly say they're Jewish anymore. That's real in America, but also the end of the dogmatic Zionist philosophical or the political agenda. This is their last. This is like their Casey at bat, Matt, and that's how dangerous it is. But it's over. The PR game. They lost the PR for the first time. The Jews lost the PR game in the media world globally. It's unbelievable if you think it from that front. There's no publicist that would take their cause right now because you can't win.
Yeah,
it doesn't add up.
One thing, and I appreciate your optimism for one, and I think we have to be, because I mean, look at 1940. That looked like the world was not coming out of that, and the world somehow did. So I think we need to harbor that optimism and continue with compassion. Like, for instance, what I would say is never conflate Judaism or Jewish people with Zionism. Zionism is a fascist ideology. We never should conflate it. So like, any Jewish person should never have to hide their name. I mean, is this 1935? You know what I mean? And it really bothers me that it's sad that some people would feel that way, but once again,
I don't know.
The people that do that are my people, though, in the sense that they're my allies. They're my friends and allies. They're, one of my best friends is a Mizrahi Jew. She's Israeli. And I would take a bullet for her, because she's also, her level of courage to stand up to Zionism and also highlight the racism towards Mizrahi Jews that she experienced when she was in Israel, is sheer amount of racism, because she looks Palestinian, basically, because she's closely related to the Palestinians. And but I want to say, though, that I really appreciate that hope, because I think we have to. I think we have to be optimistic.
Well, if I could add more to the hope pipe here, it just kind of my closing. I for the first time, and I'm very serious. We have a country here in the U.S. that has come together, despite what the radical or what's happening in the cities, because you can't know for sure if that's Mossad doing it or paid agitators or whoever. But I've seen people all over the spectrums coming together, and that's just in the independent media, because for the first time, Matt, we're able to put a description, a face on one of the biggest adversary culprits that has been embedded within this country that we've ever known of. We're now putting the pieces together, and it's uniting people. So many. In fact, a lot of people say, well, MAGA is this, MAGA. The MAGA movement is against this. And let me tell you, they're not going to forget, or nobody's going to forget, the traitors of this country who have been shilling and traitorous for quite some time. They're not going to forget that. And the problems, or the answer isn't to now vote Democrat, the next election and then vote. No, the answer is to get rid of these two limited hangouts of political parties.
Well, because they're
and
both
form a new one.
Exactly, because they're both they're the two faces of empire. Yeah. At this point. Yeah. And what I want to say too is one of the most dangerous culprits is not even AIPAC. AIPAC is obviously very dangerous. But have you heard of CUFI, the Christians United for Israel? It's called one of the CUFI? These are the and the arms industry. Like, keep these in mind that these so the United States is, so like me saying the United States being taken over by this parasitic wasp is not totally correct, because in the sense the United States is in on this. The United States is pushing this, has been complicit in this for a long time. And that's giving them an off, saying, And
here's something new to the equation too. This just happened yesterday. We have now the ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, he just announced late last night he is writing a recommendation of that some action be taken, because he's being prohibited to bring pastors over and give them a tour to Israel. The Christian pastors, they won't allow it now. He's now finding some disgust in his palate for that regime over there. So we could see the tide turn maybe a little bit. Hey, Kennedy had an awakening, an epiphany. Maybe Donald Trump might have that. Maybe he has something up his sleeve, or one of the Donald Trumps. We don't know. So, but the people have spoken, though. The people have spoken.
I'm a little more, because Trump is in the pocket of Adelson.
Yes.
She's the richest Israeli, so I'm very skeptical about that part. I think
we have to be skeptical, but we are coming together as a people. Matt, this was so great of you to do this here tonight for all of us, because these are things I want to know, because I just, we should have done before, but not everybody does know. This could be, this was new for me, a lot of this stuff, but thank you for doing this. And people want to follow you. We want to see you for our Halloween show in the actual garb that you're wearing tonight. A lot of people are loving it. The ladies like it. And it's great.
That was in Niger, by the way. That was a Tuareg guy did that for me. It was on the border of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, in a town called Bankilare. So.
And here's Dorothy Lawson from Canada saying, listening from Canada, we are hoping USA can come to the rescue of Canada. Yes, we hope so too. If not, Dorothy, I'll go there myself, and I'll bring Matt with me. We'll save you, and we'll get some militia guys too. We'll get the Stern gang. Okay, so they're all retired and walkers and stuff. So we want to thank the people on Rumble. Let me check Rumble here. I have terrible equipment. We'll have our new get up and set up next week. Okay, we have one more question on Rumble. I think this is it. We have Kenny59B with a statement. Kenny says, Israel has never wanted Christians in Israel. That's true. That's true. Rebel Mama says, thanks so much, Matt. Come back soon. And the real General Mahdi says, excellent build, fellas. Going to have to rewatch after I'm all caught up. And if I could recommend to a very hardcore documentary is Europa. The first three parts of it are pretty good. So that's a good one to do. All right, Matt, thank you very much. And thank you to everybody. So I will be back tomorrow night for the members only. You don't want to miss tomorrow night's show. And then you can catch Matt usually with me and others giving the reviews of some of the most classic albums and just reviews altogether of the modern era music as we know it. And I got to be honest, Matt, when you were saying Wasp earlier, I was thinking of that that
The
hair
band
metal
Wasp.
band. I'm like, why is he talking about Wasp? It has nothing to
Well,
talk
you know
about
I'm a
Rat
music.
Pets and Poison.
You know I'm a music nerd, so it'll probably always
Yes.
go back to music. So
Yes, but you're a brave guy. You're not a lot of. I got to give you credit. Not a lot of filmmakers would go to some of the far reached areas of the peninsula, all the way to the Middle East, like you have, with war-torn countries and in revolutions, like you were in Libya. So you are a brave man. So there you have it. Okay, for Matt, Millan, and everyone else here at Real Deal Media's Late Night Thoughts, I'm Dean Ryan, saying thank you for sharing a bit of your thoughtful night with us. We went back in time. Until next time, always remember to stay tuned and stay awake. A good night, everybody, and peace in the Middle East, finally. Good night.